Something happens in a man when he's been dismissed too many times, when his concerns have been ignored too often, when he's raised the same issue for the 10th time and received the same deflection, the same eye roll, the same performance of being wronged for even bringing it up. He stops, not dramatically, not with a speech or ultimatum or a scene. He just quietly stops. No announcement, no warning, no final argument. One day he simply decides, somewhere deep and wordless, that he's done investing in something that isn't investing back. And from that moment forward, something fundamental shifts in how he moves through the relationship. This is Mr. Eugene, and today we're talking about the silent shift. The moment a man checks out of a relationship while still physically present in it, what drives a man to that point? What it actually looks like from the inside? And why by the time she notices it, the distance is usually far greater than she realizes? This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in modern relationships. Women consistently misread the signs until it's too late. And men rarely have language for what's actually happening inside them when it occurs. Today, we're giving that experience the honest examination it deserves. Let me start with what checking out actually is, because it's frequently confused with things it isn't. Checking out is not the same as being angry. An angry man is still emotionally engaged. He still cares enough to react, to fight, to try to change things. Anger in a relationship, as frustrating as it is, actually represents continued investment. The man is still trying, still pushing, still hoping something will shift. Checking out is not the same as the silent treatment. The silent treatment is a tactic, a deliberate withdrawal designed to communicate displeasure and produce a specific response. It's conscious, intentional, a form of engagement through disengagement. Checking out is something quieter and more permanent than either of these. It's the internal decision, often made without full conscious awareness, that emotional investment in this dynamic is no longer worth the cost. It's not performed for her benefit. It's not designed to produce a reaction. It simply is. The man who has checked out isn't trying to punish her with his distance. He's genuinely stopped caring about the outcome enough to fight for it. That distinction is critical because it means the usual tools she might use to respond to male anger or withdrawal simply don't work on a man who's reached this point. So what actually drives a man to this place? Because it never happens suddenly, despite how it appears from the outside. The path to checking out is almost always a long accumulation, not one dramatic betrayal or single catastrophic event. A slow, quiet buildup of smaller moments that individually seem manageable but collectively represent something much more serious. It starts with unaddressed concerns. He raises something that matters to him. Maybe the first time he raises it calmly, clearly, with genuine hope that it can be resolved. She dismisses it. Deflects it. Makes it about his tone or his timing or his character rather than the actual issue he raised. He tries again. Different approach, different timing. Still hoping. Same result. By the third or fourth attempt, something shifts. He's learning a lesson she doesn't realize she's teaching. The lesson is that his concerns don't register here, that his experience of the relationship doesn't carry enough weight to produce genuine engagement. That raising things only creates conflict without resolution. So he stops raising things. Not forever in his mind, perhaps, but for now. Because the cost of raising them exceeds the benefit of trying. And here's what she doesn't see happening. The concern doesn't disappear when he stops voicing it. It becomes resentment. Quiet, invisible, accumulating resentment that has no outlet because expression was consistently punished or dismissed. This happens across multiple areas simultaneously. Intimacy concerns that were never genuinely addressed. Respect issues that were deflected back as attacks. Financial decisions made unilaterally. Parenting disagreements that got managed rather than resolved. Leadership attempts that were undermined rather than supported. Each one leaves a residue. Each one unresolved adds to the weight he's carrying silently. And at some point, the weight crosses a threshold and something inside him simply lets go. This is the moment of checking out. Not a decision exactly, more like a realization. The realization that he's been hoping for something this dynamic was never going to deliver, and that hope itself has become the source of his pain rather than a path to resolution. Once that realization settles, the shift begins. Let me describe what checking out actually looks like from the inside, because most men have never had this articulated clearly. The first thing that goes is the future orientation. A man who's still invested in a relationship is always thinking about its future, planning vacations together, imagining how things will look in 5 years, factoring her into decisions about career, location, finances. The future they're building together is a living, active part of how he thinks. When he checks out, that future orientation quietly disappears. He stops factoring her into long-term thinking, not as a deliberate choice, simply because the shared future no longer feels real or worth planning toward. He starts making decisions based on his own trajectory rather than a joint one. The second thing that goes is emotional reactivity. A man who's invested cares how she feels, is affected by her moods, tries to resolve conflict because her unhappiness registers as something that matters. When he checks out, her emotional state stops landing the same way. She can be upset and he observes it without being moved by it. Not because he's become cruel, because the emotional connection that made her feelings feel urgent to him has quietly severed. This is the shift she usually notices first, though she rarely reads it accurately. She registers that something is different, that her emotional states are no longer producing the response they used to produce, that he seems oddly unmoved by things that used to get a reaction. She typically interprets this as him being difficult, punishing her, withholding deliberately. She escalates to produce the reaction she's used to seeing. More emotional intensity, more conflict, more pressure. But escalation doesn't work on a man who's checked out, because he's not withholding to produce an effect. He's genuinely not as invested as he was. The escalation confirms to him that the dynamic hasn't changed. If anything, it accelerates the detachment. The third thing that goes is the effort. A man in a healthy, invested relationship puts in continuous effort. Not because it's demanded, but because he's building something and the building feels meaningful. When he checks out, the effort drops not dramatically but consistently. He stops initiating things, stops planning, stops the small daily acts of investment that kept the relationship feeling alive, not to hurt her. Because the investment no longer feels like it's going anywhere worth going. She notices the decline in effort, and again typically misreads it. She assumes he needs to be prompted or reminded. She starts requesting the effort explicitly rather than receiving it naturally. He complies occasionally because he's not trying to hurt her, but the compliance is hollow, going through motions rather than genuine investment. That hollowness is something she can feel even if she can't name it. Something is off. He's present but not present, doing the things but not in the way he used to do them. And here's what makes this particularly painful for both people. He often doesn't fully understand what's happened to him either. He hasn't made a conscious decision to leave. He hasn't sat down and concluded the relationship is over. He's simply arrived at a place of profound indifference that replaced the investment he once felt. He might still love her in some residual sense, might not want to blow the family apart, might stay for years in this state, present in body, gone in every way that actually mattered. This is what the research on relationship dissolution calls emotional divorce. The legal or physical separation often comes years after the real separation, which happened quietly in his heart long before anyone acknowledged it. Now let me talk about the moment she realizes it, because the day she finally sees it is almost never the day it actually happened. There's usually a significant gap between when he checked out and when she notices clearly enough to respond. The realization comes in different ways for different women. Sometimes it's a conversation where she expects his usual reaction and gets nothing. A flatness that she can't explain away. Sometimes it's a moment of genuine connection with someone else, a friend, a colleague, anyone, that makes her realize she can't remember the last time she felt that connected to her partner. Sometimes it's something he says in a moment of unusual honesty, or doesn't say when she expects him to. Sometimes it's watching him make a major decision, a career move, a financial decision, without consulting her in the way he once would have, and realizing with a cold clarity that she's no longer central to how he plans. And whatever form the realization takes, it's almost always accompanied by the same devastating awareness. This didn't just happen. This has been building for a long time. She missed it, or saw it and hoped it would resolve itself, or saw it and didn't know how to address it without admitting things she wasn't ready to admit. What happens after the realization is where things diverge dramatically depending on the woman. Some women respond with genuine accountability. They recognize their contribution to the dynamic that produced this. They approach him honestly and directly, not with panic or manipulation, but with real acknowledgement of what went wrong and genuine desire to understand whether repair is possible. These conversations are rare, but they happen. And when they happen with a man who hasn't yet crossed the final threshold, who still has some remaining investment, they can sometimes open something up that was closed. The key word there is sometimes, because checking out is not a linear process with a clear reversal switch. It's a gradual dying of investment that doesn't simply reverse because she finally notices and engages. There may be too much accumulated resentment, too many years of carrying unaddressed weight, too much distance built up in the silence. Other women respond with panic. They escalate, they demand. They try to produce through force or emotion the investment that dried up naturally over years. This almost never works and usually accelerates the final exit because it confirms everything that made him check out in the first place. Others respond with denial. They acknowledge the shift briefly, decide it's a phase, go back to the dynamic that produced it, and are genuinely shocked when he eventually leaves physically to match where he already left emotionally years earlier. Here's what men watching this need to understand about their own experience of this phenomenon. If you recognize yourself in what's been described here, if you've been in this quiet, checked-out state for months or years, there's something worth sitting with honestly. Checked out is not the same as done. It's a signal, a serious one, but a signal of something that needs to be addressed rather than simply endured indefinitely. The man who checks out and says nothing, who stays in the relationship in this hollow state for years out of obligation or inertia or fear of the disruption that leaving would cause, is not protecting himself or the relationship. He's delaying an inevitable outcome, while losing years he could be living fully somewhere else. The honest path, as uncomfortable as it is naming what's happened, to himself first. Then to her, if there's any remaining investment worth protecting, that conversation sounds something like this. I need to tell you honestly that something has shifted in me. I'm not sure exactly when it happened, but I've reached a place where I'm not as invested in what we have as I used to be. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because staying silent about it isn't fair to either of us. That conversation is genuinely difficult. It will produce pain. It will likely produce the very emotional intensity he's been exhausted by. But it's more honest than years of hollow presence that drains both people while resolving nothing. And if the relationship is to have any chance of genuine repair, it requires that honesty. Without it, she cannot understand the actual severity of where things stand. Without it, he cannot know whether genuine change is possible or whether he's simply postponing the inevitable out of discomfort with confrontation. Women in this audience, if you're hearing this and recognizing something in your own relationship, the question worth asking is not, what do I do to bring him back? That question treats the symptom without addressing the cause. The question worth asking is, what created this distance? What concerns were raised and dismissed? What investments were made and not reciprocated? What dynamic was allowed to persist long enough that a good man quietly stopped believing in it? Those answers, honestly examined, are the only starting point for anything genuine. The silent shift is one of the most devastating things that can happen in a long-term relationship. Not because of the drama it creates, but because of the absence of drama. Because it happens so quietly, because by the time it's visible, it's usually been true for a very long time. Good men don't check out because they stop loving. They check out because they got tired of being the only one trying. Because the investment stopped feeling reciprocal. Because they learned through repeated experience that their concerns didn't matter enough to be genuinely addressed. Understanding this doesn't assign blame to one person. It describes a dynamic that both people contributed to, even if in different ways. But it does mean that the time to respond to a man's concerns is when he raises them, not when he stops raising them, because the silence that follows is not resolution. It's the beginning of an ending that will play out on its own timeline, whether anyone acknowledges it or not. Men, have you been in this place, present in body but long gone in every way that matters? And did anything bring you back, or did the distance just keep growing? Subscribe for the honest conversations about what actually happens inside men that the people around them rarely see until it's far too late.